Talk, music, get it all.
24 hours.
On West Africa Democracy Radio. 94.9 FM Dakar.
WADR, promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar and Bamako, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and welcome to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. First, our top stories. Senegal's ruling PASTEF party cautions President Diomaye Faye over alleged involvement of members in the formation of new governments. Nigeria's police tighten security measures during the Muslim festival amid rising safety concerns.
Together with all the security agencies, we further boost the security of the citizens to know that, yes, we are good to go.
Liberia places 16 travelers under Ebola surveillance.
We have screened and monitoring 16 travelers, which included 9 Ugandans, 1 from DRC.
Ghana begins evacuation of citizens from South Africa over xenophobic attacks. Please stay tuned for the details of these stories and more.
On the news, this is Veronique Joy.
Thank you for joining us. Newslink begins in Senegal as the country's ruling PASTEF party has pushed back against reported consultations by President Bassirou Diomaye Faye over plans for a new government. Francis Boniface reports.
In a statement on Tuesday, the party led by the now President of the National Assembly, Ousmane Sonko, said any cooperation with the presidency must respect the coalition's 2024 reform agenda. These include transparency in debt management, action on the rising cost of living, continued renegotiation of strategic contracts, stronger anti-corruption measures, and clarity on judicial and ministerial matters. PASTEF also stressed that discussions on government formation must go through the official party channels, not individual members. The statement follows rising tensions within Senegal's ruling coalition after President Faye last week dismissed Sonko as Prime Minister. But Sonko's reinstatement to Parliament and election as Speaker of the National Assembly on Monday have intensified speculation over divisions at the top of the government. It should be recalled that the opposition parliamentary group, Takwalu, led by Aissata Tall Sall, had described Sonko's reinstatement as an institutional coup. The group has vowed to initiate a legal process in the coming days.
That was Francis Boniface with that report. More on political matters in Guinea. The appeals court has reviewed the case against former central bank governor and UFDC vice president Ibrahima Sherif Bah, who now risks a longer prison sentence over corruption-related charges. Bah was initially sentenced to 5 years in prison and fined 5 billion Guinean francs after being convicted of embezzlement of public funds, illicit enrichment, money laundering and abuse of office. Usman Umar has the details.
The final phase of the trial involving Guinea's former central bank governor, Ibrahima Sherif Bah, was highly anticipated, especially given the country's ongoing liquidity crisis, which the central bank has been struggling to resolve for months. Sentenced in the first instance to 5 years in prison and a fine of 5 billion Guinean francs, the Special Prosecutor's Office requested an increase in the sentence handed down last May. Special Prosecutor Alphonse Charles Wright this time requested a 10-year prison sentence for the former governor of Guinea's central bank, Ibrahima Sherif Bah. The prosecution also requested that the seizure of his asset be maintained for the benefit of the state. Following the prosecutor's closing arguments, the defense lawyers pleaded for their client's acquittal and a reduction in the fines. At the conclusion of the proceedings, the court decided to take the case under advisement. The court will deliver its verdict on June 9, 2026. As a reminder, the former governor of the Central Bank of Guinea and vice president of the UFDG, the main opposition political party now dissolved, was found guilty in the first instance of embezzlement of public funds, illicit enrichment, money laundering, and abuse of office.
Usman Umar with that report by our Conakry correspondent Cherno Alpha Ibrahima Balde. In Nigeria, the national security agencies have stepped up measures to safeguard residents during the Muslim festival. Authorities say the move is aimed at protecting communities from criminal activities and armed attacks. Meanwhile, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is calling on Muslims across the country to embrace sacrifice, unity and national renewal as they mark Eid al-Adha. The president also says the government's ongoing economic reforms are beginning to deliver positive results. WADR's correspondent Yechenu Sasitu reports.
In a statement, President Bola Tinubu acknowledged the economic challenges facing citizens, but maintained that his administration's reforms are beginning to stabilize the economy and create long-term opportunities for growth. The president urges citizens to remain patient and hopeful, stressing that the sacrifices being made will eventually produce positive outcomes for the country. At the same time, Senate President Godswill Akpabio calls on Nigerians to embrace the values of sacrifice, unity, tolerance, and national renewal as the country continues to confront economic and security challenges. Meanwhile, the Nigeria Police Force in the Federal Capital Territory has activated Operation Sweep and deployed officers across strategic locations in Abuja to strengthen security during the Eid el-Kabir celebrations. DCP Isiaku Sharu says patrols, stop and search operations and surveillance activities have been intensified to protect residents and visitors throughout the festive period.
We are not oblivious of the fact that there is the issue of some element of security threat. Going together with all the security agencies will further boost the security of the citizens to know that, yes, we are good to go.
The agencies involved in the operation include the Nigerian Military, Department of State Services, DSS, Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, Federal Road Safety Corps, Nigerian Immigration Service, and other relevant stakeholders. For WADR, Yechenu Sasitu in Abuja.
Meanwhile, Burkina Faso's Transitional Legislative Assembly has unanimously adopted a new law regulating the country's military reserve system. The legislation, approved Tuesday by all 57 lawmakers present, forms part of a broader reform launched on May 26, 2026. It aims to create a supplementary force of 100,000 reservists before the year ends. Reservists are civilians who serve part-time in the armed forces. Imo Edit has more.
The bill presented by the Minister of State for Defense and Veterans Affairs, Major General Celestin Simpore, seeks to establish a permanent national mobilization mechanism to respond to ongoing security threats. Under the new framework, the reserve force will be divided into two categories. The first order reserve will include former military personnel, retired police officers, and ex-members of the Volunteers for the Defense of the Homeland, or VDPs, who can be mobilized immediately due to their experience. The second order reserve will consist of volunteer civilians and former participants in the National Patriotic Service who will undergo military and civic training. Speaking before the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defense and Security, General Simpore stressed that joining the reserve force is voluntary and not considered formal employment. He also notes that female reservists will not be deployed during pregnancy, citing the protection of maternal and child health. Burkinabe authorities say the reform is necessary because of the current security and geopolitical environment. The reserve force is a strategic tool to strengthen national defense, recover the territory, and reinforce ties between the Burkinabe army and the population.
That was Imo Edit with that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
And now talking health emergencies. The Liberian government has quarantined 16 travelers who arrived in the country from East African countries following the Ebola outbreak in Central Africa. The development was disclosed on Tuesday by the Ministry of Health during a briefing at the National Assembly. Health officials in Monrovia say they have strengthened surveillance and precautionary measures. WDR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Appearing before lawmakers, Acting Director General of the National Public Health Institute of Liberia, Dr. Siawata Kamana, disclosed that the 16 individuals recently entered Liberia from countries including Ethiopia and Uganda.
We are screened and monitoring 16 travelers from the affected region, which included 9 Ugandans, 3 Liberians, 1 from DRC. Liberia continues to strengthen surveillance at airports, seaports, and ground crossings.
Meanwhile, Liberia's health minister, Dr. Louis Okpoto, warns that limited financial support continues to hamper preparedness effort, revealing that Liberia requires at least $4 million United States dollars to enhance the country's Ebola response capacity.
We have limited emergency preparedness funding. We do not have an emergency fund in the budget. We also have limited healthcare infrastructure as well as limited isolation capacity and essential equipment for an outbreak.
Additionally, the Liberia Immigration Service Commissioner General, Elijah Rufus, says the institution remains committed to enforcing all health-related measures at the country's ports of entry. The legislative hearing underscores growing regional concern over infectious disease threats and Liberia's determination to avoid a repeat of the 2014 devastating Ebola crisis that overwhelmed healthcare system. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
Away from Liberia, the first batch of Ghanaian citizens fleeing xenophobic attacks in South Africa is expected to arrive in Accra today, Wednesday. More than 300 Ghanaians are being repatriated aboard a government-chartered flight from Johannesburg. The evacuation exercise, initially scheduled to begin May 21st, was postponed following a surge in requests from Ghanaians seeking repatriation, as well as logistical and permit-related challenges. Authorities say a second batch of evacuees is also expected to return home on Friday as efforts continue to assist Ghanaians affected by violence targeting African migrants in parts of South Africa. Here is Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa, Benjamin Kwachi, confirming the evacuation.
Sure, after the visit of the Honorable Foreign Affairs Minister and the reassurance he gave the Ghanaian community as to reasons why he believes that home is the best place to be if you feel unwelcome in South Africa, if you feel you are undocumented in this country, with all the challenges that keep recurring every year, it has urged most of the Ghanaian citizens that find themselves in South Africa to decide to go back home, especially at the backdrop of the fact that the minister indicated to all of us here about government's intention to reintegrate these evacuees into the Ghanaian system, giving them something to do, ensuring that they have their lives back. I think the first batch of over 300 Ghanaians evacuees who voluntarily gave their names for the repatriation will be arriving in Ghana in the early hours before noon. We're sure that the plane would have touched down at Kotoka International Airport. They depart South Africa at 6 a.m. local time, which is 4 a.m. Ghanaian time. And so we expect that they should be home before 12 midday in Accra, Ghana.
That was Ghana's High Commissioner to South Africa, Benjamin Kwachi, speaking there. We will hear more on this on our guest interview segment. In Togo, fuel prices have increased following a new government directive announced on Tuesday. The price of gasoline has increased from 680 to 725 CFA francs per litre, while diesel now rises from 695 to 750 CFA francs per litre. The adjustment was confirmed in an interministerial decree signed by 3 government ministers. However, citizens are denouncing the government's decision to increase fuel prices. Abdullah Hassan gives us the details.
The new measure supersedes the provisions of March 14, 2025. Starting May 27, consumers will now pay slightly more for fuel at the pump price. The government justifies this adjustment by citing fluctuations in fuel prices. The price of unleaded gasoline has increased from 680 CFA francs to 725 CFA francs per litre, representing a rise of 45 CFA francs. Diesel has increased from 695 CFA francs to 750 CFA francs, and kerosene is now 1,040 CFA francs. Benetti Gagalo, President of the Togolese Consumers Association, ATC, is calling for support measures to help vulnerable groups cope with the price increase.
By ministerial decree, the government has increased the price of petroleum products at the pump. The Togolese Association of Petroleum Industries, ATC, believes this decision risks further exacerbating the economic and social difficulties faced by most Togolese, especially the most vulnerable households. Consequently, the ATC calls on the government to reconsider this decision, to open an inclusive dialogue with all social and economic stakeholders, and to implement urgent support measures to protect consumers from the rising cost of living. This increase will undoubtedly impact the costs of transportation, food, services, and basic necessities.
The interministerial decree specifies that in areas far from service stations, prices may be increased by a maximum of 20 CFA francs per litre by the Regional Directorate of Trade and Quality Control.
A report filed by our Lome correspondent Ida Bajo and presented by Abdullah Hassan. You're listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting at 94.9 FM, online, on YouTube and Facebook. Here's a reminder of our top stories. Senegal's ruling PASTEF party cautions President Diomaye Faye over alleged involvement of members in the formation of new government. Nigeria's police tighten security measures during the Muslim festival amid rising safety concerns. Liberia places 16 travelers under Ebola surveillance, and Ghana begins evacuation of citizens from South Africa over xenophobic attacks. Still ahead in the news, we have the guest interview and sports news. Stay with us.
West Africa Democracy Radio. It's you speaking.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, across the world, Muslims are today celebrating Eid al-Adha. The religious festival, known locally as Tobaski, is observed with prayers, family gatherings, and the traditional sacrifice of rams. But this year's celebration in many West African countries, such as the Gambia, is taking place against the backdrop of rising prices and growing economic pressure on households. In this report, WADR Sang Donald Mendy has some reactions.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
Across the Gambia, this morning, thousands of Muslims gathered in mosque and open prayer grounds to celebrate Eid al-Adha, locally known as Tobaski. Traditionally, Tobaski is marked by communal prayers, family gatherings, and the slaughtering of rams with meat shared among relatives, neighbors, and the poor. But this year's celebrations come at a time of mounting economic hardship and rising living costs for many Gambian families. Yet, behind the celebration and festivities, many Gambians say this year's Tobaski has been financially challenging.
The government should do something because everything is costly. Even to buy a shirt or trouser, it's costly.
The way economy is going is too hard. Many cannot afford. So I think it's going to hinder the celebration because you cannot celebrate to the extent in which you want because the cost, money.
Let's say you come from extended family, a parents that are a family of 6. You want to care for all those 6 children because it's the day that children, they want to put on new clothes. It is a religious fest, but that doesn't mean you have to put on new clothes. We don't even have, you can also put on your best clothes and go and celebrate the day. But to be honest, the living cost, I believe, going to hinder the celebration to some extent.
At livestock markets in the days leading up to the feast, traders reported a sharp increase in the price of rams. Many of the animals sold in the Gambia are imported from neighboring countries, including Senegal and Mali. Alaji Amat Sambu, a ram seller, says rising transport costs and inflation boost prices significantly higher this year.
If you look at the feedings we used to feed our rams, they are always imported from outside the country. The people selling them have to change dollars into CFA to go and buy the feedings, then pay for transport and customs duties before bringing them into the country. Because of all of these costs, they cannot sell them at a cheap price. Even the wheat brand sold at Bon Road now costs around $1,800 to $1,900 per sack. When traders go to buy the feedings, they also consider the decline of the dollars, an increase in fuel prices. So they add all these costs.
Transportation has also been a major concern during the festive period. Ahead of Tobaski, thousands traveled from the Greater Banjul area to provincial towns and villages to celebrate with relatives. But many commuters complained about increased transport fares at a time when food prices and households' expenses are already stretching family budgets.
Alhamdulillah. Thank God we came and boarded the buses in peace. We are ready to travel, but the issue is the increase in fares. The fares are too expensive, and that is what is disturbing us. Because if you do not have around $850, you will not be able to travel. It is painful.
Religious leaders, meanwhile, are reminding worshippers about the deeper meaning of celebration. Ustaz Taha Sisi, an Islamic scholar, says Tobaski is not only about sacrifice but also compassion, charity and unity among communities.
Tobaski is a sunnah, which is not obligation, but they call it sunnah mu'akkada in the Islamic terms. In the Sharia jurisprudence, what it means is that it's a practice that the Prophet ﷺ did, and he said that it's obligation for someone who can do to do it.
As the day continues, families across the Gambia will gather around meals, exchange greetings and continue tradition rooted in faith and community. And despite the economic pressure facing many households, the spirit of Tobaski remains strong.
Politics, analysis on major news, social matters and all. This is A Guest.
As over 300 Ghanaian nationals are expected to arrive from South Africa later today as part of Ghana's evacuation plan, WDR spoke with Fred Duho, Media Relations Officer at the Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on the arrangements in place for their reception and plans for their reintegration. He outlines the support measures being considered for the returnees, including immediate assistance upon arrival.
We are expecting our patriots from South Africa latest by 3 p.m. GMT in Ghana. The Minister for Foreign Affairs, Honorable Samuel Okudzeto-Ablakwa, as well as a high-powered government delegation are expected, including the Chief of Staff, at the Accra International Airport today to welcome our compatriots back home. As planned, we are going to give them some hero welcome.
Some Ghanaians still remain in South Africa awaiting evacuation. How concerned are you about their safety, especially after the delays already experienced in moving the first batch out?
Well, this very first delays has taught us some lessons and how to go about it. So we don't really envisage any further delay with the subsequent evacuations. We are believing that the second and probably the third and fourth evacuations, if possible, would all be done smoothly. Now, we do know the plan we are all working with in terms of the South African and the Ghanaian authorities. And by Ghanaian authorities, I mean our High Commission in South Africa, led by the High Commissioner, Excellency Benjamin Kwache. They are doing all the legworks in South Africa to ensure that we have smooth evacuation of our compatriots.
I know you did mention that they will be welcomed at the airport, but what kind of immediate support should be awaiting them once they land in Ghana?
In fact, when they come, we expect them to be welcomed by the high-powered delegation, as I mentioned earlier, followed by that registering them on some national ID cards that some of them do not have. So those without our Ghana cards will be registered immediately to pave way for them to be able to access basic services across government and private sector institutions. There is going to be some free psychosocial therapy offered to them by experts. The government, led by the president, has promised to give them some allowances, some money to settle down while all plans that have been put in place are rolled out gradually to fully reintegrate them into the Ghanaian society. But I can assure you that plans are well advanced to the point where we are believing that when they come, they will never miss South Africa again. Some of them have vowed never to return to South Africa, but well, that is their decision. But generally, it is our expectation that when they come, we give them the necessary comfort. The South Africans ask them to go back to their country to fix their country. We want to let them know that indeed, when these people return, they will see visible signs of the fixing that they are asking for. In fact, Ghana is not at war. Ghana's economy at this moment has been progressing steadily.
Now, do repeated xenophobic attacks and emergency evacuations risk undermining the idea of African solidarity and free movement on the continent?
Absolutely. We've been talking about African unity for decades now, from our forefathers. As we speak, the data available shows that even trading among ourselves compared to other regions globally, African continent is doing woefully inadequate. And we are hoping that we can have this borderless continent, that people can have free movement, go to Nigeria, go to Kenya, be in Senegal the following week. This is the Africa we envisage. So this unfortunate circumstances really has retrogressed us by some years when we've already made some significant progress. We talk of the African Continental Free Trade Area. A united Africa is possible, but some of this myopic sentiment from these our brothers in South Africa, some of them I must put on record because not all of them are involved. Some of our brothers and sisters in South Africa leading the charge against fellow Black Africans. It's totally uncalled for.
That was Fred Duho, Media Relations Officer at Ghana's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And now with the sports news, Senegal's President Bassirou Diomaye Faye on Tuesday in Dakar officially handed over the national flag to the Teranga Lions ahead of their departure for the 2026 FIFA World Cup in the United States, Canada and Mexico. The ceremony took place at the Presidential Palace where President Faye urged the team coached by Pap Chow to aim high and not travel to the tournament just to make up the numbers. The Senegal squad is set to leave Dakar to continue its preparation for the World Cup, where it has been drawn in Group I alongside France, Norway and Iraq. The Lions will begin their campaign on June 16, 2026 against France in New York before facing Norway on June 23rd and Iraq on June 26th. And several young Kenyan athletes impressed during national trials held in Nairobi ahead of the 2026 World Athletics Under-20 Championship scheduled in Eugene, Oregon in the United States. Kenya unveiled part of its emerging talent pool at the trials, where several athletes secured qualification for the junior competition. And in the men's 3,000 meters, Emmanuel Kiprono delivered one of the standout performances. And in the women's 500 meters, Cynthia Kipru remained and continued her strong form by winning. That's all for the sports news, and with that we have come to the end of this edition of Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Ismaila Kamara and Maudo for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram and Facebook at WADR English. Coming up is a rebroadcast of WADR's gender program 50-50, and it will be followed by the news in French with Demba Amar An. I am Veronique Njai. Good afternoon.
We thank you for listening to Newslink in Nigeria on Love FM Abuja and Darling FM Owerri. In the Gambia on Hot FM Banjul, Hilltop FM and Veritas Radio in Serekunda. Thank you for listening on Alternative Youth Radio Lofa County, Liberia, Radio Kegaman in Nimba County, and DCN Radio Riverses County. A big thank you to Radio Graft FM in Sierra Leone for listening, and in Ghana we thank Radio